Good evening and welcome to the Westerville Board of Education meeting. This is May 18th, 2015, and I'm President Davidson. And I'm sorry for reading this. Ron, our cameraman, gave this to me because we were just downstairs recognizing our retirees. So we have already taken roll and said the Pledge of Allegiance. So we are going to move on. We've also recognized our fabulous retirees. And we are going to 5.01, discussion of the Board of Education minutes for the meeting May 4th. Does anyone have any comments, questions, concerns? Nope. Okay. Then moving on to 6.01, public comments, and these comments need to pertain to action items. I have a paper up here, Peg Duffy. Do they pertain to action items this evening? Okay, so welcome to the podium. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, the sign-up sheet wasn't there, so Mr. Hirschheiser created one, which was witnessed by 2 other staff persons. My comments relate to agenda item 13.04. On the 26th of January, you may recall that in a report by Mr. LaRose, we heard about options for what we might do with Longfellow Central College, and there was discussion on the warehouse annex. Most of these were consent decisions, not official yay-nay votes. In that discussion, board members had difficulty, understandably, separating their personal feelings from what is best for the district. There was concern that if we sold the warehouse annex, there was no way of working with the neighborhood, concern for what would happen with the building. There was some discussion about going into the real estate business. Should we rent this? Do we want to be in the real estate business, or do we want to sell it? Fortunately, at some point in that discussion, something came up saying, are we doing our job as a board? And based on that, I ask you tonight to do your job as a board member. Separate your personal feelings from what is best for the district when you vote on this item. And incidentally, I support sale of the warehouse annex.
Okay, thank you, Peg. Moving on to financials, 7.01, a resolution to approve financial reports and investments as of April 2015. The financial report lists all funds ending April 2015. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Second.
Bart?
Okay. I'm having some voice issues, so please bear with me a little bit. For general fund for the month of April, month-to-date receipts are $3,445,000. Year-to-date receipts for the general fund is $141,391,000. Year-to-date expenditures for the general fund are $116,243,000. We have an unencumbered fund balance of $62,226,000 for all funds of the district, which include 23 pages of funds. Our year-to-date receipts are $187,609,000. Year-to-date expenditures are $164,423,000, and the unencumbered fund balance for all funds is $75,458,000. That's the end of my report for that one.
Okay. Questions? Comments? Okay.
Dr. French?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Villardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Moving on to 7.02, resolution to approve the updated 5-year forecast for fiscal years 2015 through FY19. Bart, I'm sorry, may I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
What I was going to say, do you want to take a minute and?
Yeah, let me
Okay, yes.
fix something here. Okay, Mrs. Davidson, members of the board, this is the updated 5-year forecast. Statutorily, I'm going to find my clicker here. Statutorily, we do this twice a year. The purpose of the presentation basically is we submit to the state of Ohio. They review it to see if there's any issues, to see if they need to place this in fiscal emergency, fiscal caution, whatnot. But statutorily, we have to do this twice a year. I know the board has seen this multiple times, but I always try to make this an educational process for anybody watching it. So I kind of repeat the same thing, so you guys will get in a pattern. We have to do this by October 31st of every year and May 31st of every year, and it's filed with the state of Ohio. We also have it on our webpage. Once this is done, you can click on from our webpage as well. What I try to do for here, and I know probably if you're in the back, you're not going to be able to see it, but what I try to do, make sure everybody understands at least how to read this when you see it. On the left side, my clicker's not, where's, you guys aren't going to see that. The clicker's not very strong. All right. Right on the left side here, this is the list of just the revenue, where the revenue sources come from. It's right in through here. And the way you read it, these 3 years are the past 3 years. So if you want to know what lines correspond to what fiscal year, those are the 3 years, which are right here, 3 years. The yellow line is the current fiscal year we're in, and the next 4 are the projected years, which is part of the forecast. And in this case, and I'll explain a little bit later, those 4 years, we don't know what the state's doing with those 4 years. So there's one line we kind of assume. For the other lines, we believe that we have them pretty close. To give you a little line by line, to show you what the differences are from what we said in October versus what we said now for the board, what I did here, this top row is the new forecast. It's an updated forecast. This bottom row tells you what we had numbers in October, and this number to the right of it tells you what is currently in May. So there's, for the board, there's October. So basically, between the two, we're up $941,000. Basically, it's just because 98.8% of the taxes were collected in that year. So it was a good turnout for the city of Westerville taxpayers. So that's the reason we're up. You can see the difference, 941,000, but you can see as we go across, and I will point this out to you, as we go across this line, you can say, well, how do we go from 104 million in 2017, which is for you guys right there, to in 2019, we're at 91,000. And 18, we're at 97. The emergency levy cannot be, expires in calendar year 17. And by law, we can't assume the passage of that levy. So that's why you see the numbers decrease on the real estate, is we can't assume that the levy is going to pass or be renewed. So that's why you see the numbers are declining. The next line is tangible personal property, homestead rollback. We actually received this money from the state. We're actually only off on this line, actually $35,000. So it's not bad. It's pretty good. Keep in mind the homestead rollback, we used to get about $5.4 million on this line item when the state changed it. So when you hear the state talking about tangible personal property, it doesn't really apply to us anymore from what they used to get from the businesses. Westerville was eliminated about 3 years ago. We used to, and again, it started back in '06. They started the process of eliminating it. And then a couple years ago, we lost it all. So just picture what we could have done with $5.4 million every year, which we don't have. But tangible personal property is pretty much on schedule. And also, I will point out, the emergency levy that we're collecting, the state is paying the homestead rollback on that levy. One of the things that the state changed a couple years ago was any new levy passed, I think it was after November 2013, I believe, the state is not paying that the rollback on that anymore, the 10%, the share that they would pay. One of the advantages, if the board so chooses to renew that our emergency levy, because it's a renewal of a levy that was prior to the new law, the state continues to pay that on our behalf. So that's one pro for it. The next line is the state foundation, and the state foundation basically is what we receive from the state. The funding formula currently is $5,800 per pupil, which means because of the way we are funded, this district receives about $2,343 per student of that $5,800, because that's what the state share for this district is. Everything else is collected locally. Okay, now going forward, and I'll show you in a picture in a minute. Thanks, Joe. going forward in fiscal year 2015, which is the year we're in, that's the last year that the state has their 2-year biennium. So in our forecast, we projected fiscal years 16, 17, 18, and 19 as though we would see 1.5% increase in state revenue funding. Currently, we didn't put in the forecast because it's not in law, but currently the state's talking, originally the original House version said we were going to receive, I think it was 10% again, and now then it got reduced in the subversion to 7.5. Keep in mind, we only have in our forecast 1.5. And I've got an example we'll show you what that dollar figure is here in a little bit. But so just so you know, on this forecast, we only updated what we had in the forecast in October versus now. We didn't include going forward because we don't know what the state's going to do with that. So here's what the state looks like. You have an unrestricted aid and you have restricted aid. And you can see that we're up a little bit in the, I guess let me point here, in the unrestricted aid, we're up about 112,000. In the restricted aid, we're up about 274,000. They made some adjustments in there, is why we're up in those lines. But if you look at the lines above it, and I know the audience isn't going to be able to see a lot of these lines here, but we roughly this year we got $37.4 million from the state. We're projected to get 37.8 next year and 38. So we projected about a 1.5% increase each year is what's in our forecast. Once the biennium is approved and we go to the October forecast, these numbers will be updated in October. Other revenue. This is one of the lines where we're actually up $1.2 million. And one of the things that make this number up, which is hard to figure out, is this is the biggest lines we had in here is called refund from prior year expenditures. We got a check back from Franklin County Auditor for about $409,000. It was money that they had billed us a few years ago when they did reappraisal. It didn't cost them what they thought it was going to cost, so we got that money back, but because it was prior year, it goes on this line of $405. From State Teachers Retirement System, we got a refund of $522,000, and that was from the prior year bills. We try to set up the bills we think we're going to pay. Well, anyway, that was, so those two lines right there are over $900,000. So that's what kind of makes up the other. So that one's a hard one to predict. We don't expect to get either one of those again. That's why you can see it going back next year. It drops back. It stayed the same really at 6.3. We don't expect much increase. We don't expect an increase in that line.
Can I interrupt?
Sure,
one
absolutely.
question?
I'm sorry.
I just wondered if you have any idea of why State Teachers Retirement gave back $500,000.
Well, it had to do with a lot of retirements. What we do is we do a projection of salary throughout the year. You don't know who's going to retire, so you basically pay it up front. And so when it's all done, they do a true up to see, okay, what did you overpay? What did you underpay? And so that's the reason. It was just a difference from what was projected to be paid. You don't know who's going to retire, and so you set it up as though they're still coming back. When we do our report to the state, we say, here's how much salaries we're going to spend next year. But if people retire in those years, you don't pay up that salary, and technically, but we're still set up to pay the same amount for the next year.
So we pay based on an estimate then?
Right, we estimate STRS and SERS.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what I gave you here is basically the general fund. You can see it's sort of a summary of the general fund for here. This column, where's my pointer? The pointer right here, this is the dollar difference. You can see we had 941,000. This column here is the differences. We had 941,000 in property tax. You can see basically for the funds, we were up $2.3 million between really the biggest players was the real estate tax and the other revenue was the difference. So we're up $2.3 million in revenue from what we said we were going to do in October. This was just kind of a summary page. If you guys have questions, I forgot to say, if you guys have questions, stop me and we'll certainly explain them. What I gave you here, and I know you can't see this on the back row, but if you download the program, you can. This is basically to go on to expenditure side. I tried to give everybody, these are all the expenditure lines on this side. Again, you've got the 3 past years, you've got the current fiscal year, and you've got the next 4 years. And so this is basically what we're going to talk about next line by line. This just has the dollar figures in it. So what's in the personal services line? Basically, the salaries reflect the annual cost of experience. We had built in the 5-year forecast basically 2% raises for the teaching staff for the next 4 years. That doesn't mean that that's what you're going to negotiate. It's just an assumption. You could put in 0. You could put in 5. We put in 2 as an assumption, as a placeholder. So that's in the 5-year forecast as we go across. We also have a line item in there, this equivalent of $450,000. We put in there the additional of 10 FTEs. We basically said, 10 teachers, I think it was a master's 3, was 45,000. We basically put $450,000 in there for potential staffing changes each year of the 5-year forecast. So it's not just 10 this year and you don't do anything. We put them in there as an assumption for 10 each year over the next 4 years. Doesn't mean you have to spend it. Just means we've allocated it in case you want to change programming and whatnot. We also made some adjustments this past year into personal services with people who had retired the last couple years. We'll also, in October, make some adjustments going forward for the 50-some staff members that just retired this year, because in our October forecast, those teachers were assumed to just continue working. So when we do our October forecast, these numbers will drop again because those 50-some teachers will be backed out of the next forecast. So that's on the personal services line. Again, this is what we had in there, the forecast this year. You can see that the updated version across the top here. The difference between October and this year was 1.3. And I tried to go back, and there's really not one thing. In the forecast, we had an estimated payroll each year, and we were off about $100,000 each year. So cumulative, it's 1.3 million. There really wasn't anything. Sorry about that. There really wasn't one thing in there that I could find that caused that, other than just our assumptions we had for every payroll. Excuse me. Retirement insurance benefits, the 187 kind of correlates to the overages in personnel, because whatever you have in salaries is multiplied times your retirements. And so this number was off by $187,000. Mainly for those. Keep in mind, we are self-insured. January 1st, 2013, we became self-insured. We had a good year at the end of 13. We had a good year in 14, and we're projected to have another good year this year. But in our forecast, we always assume, the industry standard always says, well, you got to plan for 10% increase every year. Well, keep in mind, that's $1.6 million each year that's in our forecast that may or may not happen. We put it in there as a placeholder. So even though for 15, it worked out, I think we were at 5.1 this year, we'll see what December brings or October brings. We'll know by October what the insurance rates are going to be for next year. We have 10s in there for 16, 17, 18, 19. So those could change. We'll probably change 16. The other ones will remain 10. But those are the assumptions we have in there. Purchase services, we're within 105,000. There's not a whole lot to say in there. We assume about a 1.5% increase every year. We're pretty much on track for that one. Supplies and materials are up this year. Really the biggest thing I could find in there was we did purchase more workbooks for our students this year. And so I think those changes have us up a little bit right now. Okay, Tracy? Workbooks, and workbooks in this one here. Well, and plus if you buy Chromebooks, sometimes they're out of here as well. The law changed a few years ago. You used to buy computers out of 600s capital expenditures, but because they're so cheaper now, a lot of them come out of here. And I know we're up in Chromebooks on this line as well. We still anticipate about a 3% increase each year going forward in the 5-year forecast. And again, these are assumptions. So between now and October, if the board says, I think you ought to do 4 or 2 or whatever, share with me what your thoughts are, because this is really your forecast as well. Yeah, I put it together, but you guys are helping me as well.
So Bart, just on the 3% year-on-year increases, that just indexed to assumed inflation?
It is.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Capital outlay, we really didn't, what we said we were going to spend in October, we really didn't change that. We're pretty much on track with that. The biggest player in that number is the technology roadmap, but we really aren't expecting any dollar change in that. Those are pretty much what we think we're going to spend. Other objects, again, are like Educational Service Center, we pay for substitutes. We pay Franklin, Delaware County auditors, treasurer's fees, any win-win cases. We're actually down in those fees as well from what we anticipated. But that's sort of a hodgepodge of different fees. Transfers out, the transfers out, we pretty much have really a couple. We transfer $65,000 each year into a permanent improvement fund for turf replacement. We also, now going forward, I will say going forward, just if you remember, we had a meeting a couple months ago where we were going to take $3 million from the permanent improvement, which was curriculum and technology, and move that into this line. This does not reflect that at this time. This is only the update from October. From last October. When we get ready to do the next one, you'll see a $3 million change, and it's not necessarily going to be as a transfer out. Kind of got behind on that a little bit. The transfer out, we're not transferring from the general fund. We're actually just trading costs from the general fund. We're actually billing it, and that's actually going to be capital outlay and supplies. So not really the transfer. I forgot to mention that back, but transfers are pretty much we just transfer money out. Okay, and the other transfer that you'll see in the general fund, if we have free and reduced students that don't pay fees, we transfer money from the general fund into the 09 fund, which pays for those fees. So that's where the transfers come from. And this report, again, the people in the back aren't going to be able to see it, but if you download the report, you will. This is just a summary sheet of just the expenditures. And what I tried to do on the top line, even to help a little bit, this top line, this gray line, actually I brought in the revenue line. You can see the revenue was up $2.3 million. The expenditures cost us $1.5 million more. So really, the general fund balance is actually still going up $807,000 on this report. So the difference really is 1%. Okay, what else I got? All right, revenue overview. Again, this just talks about when the state passed they made a funding change back in 13 for fiscal years 14 and 15. That's what this forecast is basically showing. We had put a revenue cap of 1.5 or 1.5% on those reports. The state came in and gave us better than expected. They actually gave us 6.25% in fiscal year 14 and 10.5% in fiscal year 15. The forecast models, again, 1.5% cap in 16 through 19, but the state is working on a new funding formula, which will be effective July 1st, 2015, which will be part of the updated forecast in October. So it's just interesting. I always hate putting my name on something that I don't know what's in law. So that's why you don't see the increase in here. It's not in law yet. The districts, again, I've made a note too, the district's 2012 emergency levy is expected to provide a full 5-year life cycle, which will need to be renewed in calendar year 2017 if the board so chooses to do that. By law, and I'll double check it, I believe you can go, because it is an emergency levy, you can actually go in November of 16. You get it one extra shot because it's technically emergency levy. So I checked with the city. The city doesn't have any levies on in 16 of November. So if the board so chooses, that would be a decent time to put one on. It just gives you one more shot of trying to pass a levy in case it doesn't pass. And it would just be a renewal. Without the renewal levy, the district is projected to experience $25 million shortfall in revenue, which means we'll be spending more than we're bringing in. But keep in mind, in 19, you're going to lose $24 million in revenue cumulative. Yeah. Expenditure overview, staffing increases. Again, we're allocating, we have 10 additional teachers in each of the 5-year forecast. Health insurance premiums increased 5.1%. The allocation of $600,000 for additional health insurance, we ended up paying about $300,000 to the Affordable Care Act as a fee to be part of that. So we didn't pay the $600,000, we paid about $300,000 of that. Purchase services are expected to go between 1.5 and 3. I know in purchase services this year, we did have an increase because of the cold winter. I know we had to move some money into electricity and gas because buildings required some additional heating. So we did move them, but for going forward, we'll probably put the same levels back that we had because we're not expecting another bad year. In my crystal ball.
Yeah.
What I did here, this is a summary sheet, and again, I know you're going to be hard to see on this one. This is the summary sheet. I basically took the summary sheets that have the revenues up here. It has this green line is the line I always look for. I should find it on my report. The green line is the line I look at because that tells you how much you're either spending or collecting more than you're bringing in. And in 2017, I think, like Dr. Kellogg, you have to read, I think we have $5 million of this is like, we have we're actually still bringing in $5 million more in 17. In 18, we're actually spending 9.7 more. But keep in mind, we lose $8 million in the forecast because we can't assume the passage of a levy. And in this number here, we're spending $25 million more, but keep in mind, cumulative value is $24 million. So we're actually, if the levy were to be renewed, you're still close to be bringing in as much as you're expending. And there's ways we can challenge that to try to keep those numbers sustainable. But this was sort of a summary sheet that you guys, that I gave you. We still, in the fact that down here, this bottom line, actually, if you look at this line, even in fiscal year 19, I think that says $45 million. Keep in mind, that's what your cash balance is. But from there, we take away the $1.5 million, which is this line here for you guys, $1.5 million in encumbrances that are basically our checks that we still have to write for the year. And then we still have the budget reserve of $19 million, which is a 45-day cash supply if something were to go wrong. So that basically tells you that you have $24 million available that you could spend. And again, if the levy passes, you'll be back to $49 million. But that just gives you a summary sheet. Let's go to the next page. This one, I know you guys can't read this one. What I tried to do is if you download this, and it's actually in your board docs, but if you download this, this is a sheet that actually shows the levy that is included in the 5-year forecast as though it wasn't taken out. So when you look at this report, these numbers up here on top actually show the emergency levy up here. Those numbers are actually included in there. We didn't take them out so that you could see what it would look like without it. The state, remember I told you the state was going through their budget process? The state of Ohio originally in 2015 is this blue line here, so conceptually you can see the blue line. This is what the state predicted for 15. We projected a 1.5% increase for 16 and 17. When the Senate bill first came out in 2016, they projected these gold lines a 10% increase each year. That's what these lines were. And then the other bill came out and said, no, we can't do that. We're going to drop them to, I think it was 7.5. And so that's what these numbers are. And I did the quick calculations. If the first House bill came out, we would have gotten a 10%. We would have seen a $2.9 million increase in this district from what we have in the 5-year forecast in fiscal year 16. And we would have seen an additional $2.9 million, which cumulative gives you $6.3 million. If we would have gotten a 10%. With the new House, the sub-House bill recommendations, they're only projecting us at 7.5%, which is the $2 million down here, and then an additional $2 million the next year, which cumulative value is $4.4 million. So over the life of the 5-year forecast, even if we get the lower amount that the state's going to do, roughly that's a cumulative of, I think, I have no calculations, between $16 and $20 million. I forget what the number was, cumulative over the next 4 years. So it'll be interesting to see if it holds true. I hope it does, but we won't know until they pass it. But we're still looking pretty good from through the state's eyes. And I think, John, the reason that they did that, they changed, was it the ability to pay, or I forget what factor they changed on here, to try to even things out a little bit.
Yeah, the main factor was district's ability to pay and how they're calculating it. There was 2 descriptors, but in both the original governor's budget and then in the House budget, which modified the governor's budget in regard to determining the state share or our local ability to pay, the change in the metric they used in both ends, in the original budget from the governor, we fared really well. In the revised budget from the House, we fared just under really well. And so now it's back to the Senate. But that's, and everybody I've listened to say that's been the major change, is how they're going to calculate the state share or what they determine to be your local ability to pay. But in both cases, we've come out on the positive end.
Right, okay, thank you. So anyway, I threw this in, and if you guys want to look, you can see what the difference is in the versions. I'd take either version. It'd be nice to have the first one, but I think you're going to end up with the second one.
Yeah.
This is just, for those who download it, conceptually, that's what the forecast looks like. That's what we actually send to the state of Ohio. I know you can't read it, but you can see visually what it looks like, so when you get a copy of it. This is the financial stability. When we put $19 million in, this was a 45-day cash flow. You can see the green line basically is that, green line is that actual $19 million that we have in place. And you can see how much cash we have over that line. But this represents the $19 million, that line right there. This just gives you a general fund breakout. The blue line, which this is for general fund up here, the blue line is 63% real estate. This number is 63%. This number right there is 63%. The unrestricted aid, which is the state aid, is 23%, which is that line right there. And then with property tax allocation, which really is also state paid, is the yellow line, is 8%. So that's kind of the biggest pieces of the general fund makeup that we have. You can see our real estate taxes are still by far the largest. The general fund expenditures, the blue line here is 57%. That's this line. If I can get over to these guys. Right there, that's the line, 57%. The benefits are, oh, here, you know what? They didn't change it for you guys. I'm looking at my screen. Sorry, guys. These are general fund expenditures. The salaries right here are 57%, the blue line. The red line up here, benefits are at 20%. And the purchase services are at 13%. Those make up the biggest lines. The other expenditure, just so everybody knows where it says 6%, about $4 million of that is Franklin County ESC that we get our substitutes from. So really, if you're out there and you say, well, you got 57% and 20%, you probably got another 3% that we pay cumulative to the ESC if you're looking at total salaries that everybody pays, because we do get our substitutes from the ESC. And I think that's it. It is. Any questions, comments?
Just a quick comment. It's important for people to remember that when we talk about the pending increase in state aid, it's only for the state aid portion of our budget.
Correct.
So, I don't want people to think that we're looking at a 7% or 7.5% overall. It's still hefty, and I really like it, and I'm very thankful that they're looking at it the way they are, but it is only for that portion of our dollars that comes from the state.
That's correct. And that's state unrestricted, which means you can
Right.
spend it for anything. We do get restricted grants, but that's different. This is state aid, which is unrestricted. Anybody else have any questions?
Just probably just a couple of quick comments. I mean, the first is that, again, I think that the board has been diligent around, fiscal responsibility as it relates in particular to our operating reserve. I think that number, it seems like a big number, but I think you framed it well in reminding us that's 45 days. That's keeping extra in the checking account at home to make sure that we can cover the bills. And I think that's worked well for us. I think the other thing with the state that's interesting is that I think it's disappointing that once again, the state is not taking steps to fix the school funding model in general. I always like to take the moment to say that if we had been found to have not done our jobs by the state Supreme Court more than 4 times, which is the case with the state legislature, we wouldn't have our jobs. Unfortunately, nobody wants to pick up that ball and fix that situation. I do think that the state legislature, at least with the House and with the governor's office, has made an attempt to provide more parity and also to account for the fact that we have more of our income tax dollars that go out of our community that don't get returned to educate our students. I think that there's some thinking going on about that, mainly because of pressure from constituents that are, finally raising points about what is going on with this model and why aren't we fixing it. I think there are a lot of good signs as it relates to what the state is attempting to do. I think it's a good first step. I think it bodes well for the district. But back to taking our positions and taking a 2-year emergency to 5 years from an operating standpoint, to reducing our overall expenses in several different categories, and that 45-day operating reserve, I think we've positioned ourselves well from a fiscal standpoint in terms of fiscal health and accountability. So thank you, Bart. I appreciate all the work that you do on this.
Welcome. Any other questions? Yeah, let me do.
No, really, I just want to thank you for the way you do this each time, really. This is almost over my head. It's not quite, and it's not because of the way you do it. So I want to thank you on that. Echoing, we're just trying to be as fiscally wise as we can while we're waiting for other entities to also be wise in their legislation. So I think we're moving the ball forward in the right direction.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
We call roll.
Yep.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Thanks, Bart. Up next, 8.01, long-term staffing plan, and we are excited to hear about this, Dr. Kellogg.
First of all, thank you to Mr. Griffith. As you can see, through his stewardship and leadership the last several years, he's put the finances of the district in a great position. And it's from that position that I wanted to talk to the board tonight about some opportunities, and most specifically, opportunities for students. And this is, what I'm about to propose to you is driven from the strategic planning process we went through over a year and a half ago with the community. And some of the pieces that came out of that was a sense of lost blank spots, blind spots, diluted spots that represent opportunities for kids in terms of academic programs. And so we sit today in a position where, as you can see from the fund balance and the 5-year forecast, the opportunities that are there with some possibilities. So I kind of want to walk through a couple pieces of that. For the last several years, dating back to the previous board, the decision was made to do something that keeps us accountable to the public, keeps administration accountable to the board as it relates to money spent, finances used for staffing. As you know, our enrollment projections for the last couple of years have been fairly flat. So we haven't experienced much need or much push for additional staff to address enrollment increases, which is typically what you see is enrollment increases. Olentangy would be a great example of that, where enrollment increases drive you to staffing to keep numbers low. And we're not really in that position, nor do our enrollment projections indicate that that's going to be the case. So right now we function, and Ms. Griffith referenced it in his slide, a $450,000 annual allocation to be used for staffing. That number has oftentimes been referenced as 10 FTE, full-time equivalent, and meaning about $45,000 per person. Well, depending on the kind of position you're looking at, that may be more than enough or less than enough. It should be noted as well that the 450 doesn't include the benefit side, but in Mr. Griffith's forecast, correct me if I'm wrong, he accounts for that in the part of the budget where that would be accounted for. It's not absent of the 5-year forecast, it's in the 5-year forecast. So we've operated with that. And that served real effectively for us as an organization to sit down and talk about staffing and really whittle down where we need support on what we need to bring on board. And I think that's been effective. And as we stand here today, as we project forward for next year, using that allocation, that $450,000, if you ask me where we would have needs going into next year, you see the areas up here. And I apologize to the group out there, can't see where I'm pointing, but I'm looking at, there's a couple positions in special education. Most of those have to do with compliance issues and ratio of teachers to students that happen. And as we have, it's not necessarily that our special education population is increasing, it's the bubble that comes through with certain classes that move, okay? Elementary gifted is an area where we think we could make some more gains. We think there's some gaps there, particularly in the self-contained program, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, in which we have had to look at the numbers of students into the program, we allow into the program, and that's been a function more of FTE, not necessarily of student scores on gifted tests. And so we think there's an opportunity there to create more opportunities for kids. Some of the staffing we knew all along for all-day kindergarten, particularly music, art, and PE. We continue to track this, and as I note up here, a portion of this, a good portion of this, is offset by tuition revenue. Our all-day kindergarten revenue model projects if you have about 40% of the all-day kindergartners qualify for tuition waiver, you back out that 40%, our revenue generated by the rest of the student population still ranks at about $460,000. And that's at a 40% free and reduced lunch. As it stands right now, as we've reviewed the data, we're going to be a little bit, not significantly, but less than that 40% unless something goofy happens in the next couple of days. So our projected revenue, our actual revenues are probably going to outdo our projected revenues for all-day kindergarten. So some of the costs for staff that are in here are probably going to get offset within that revenue. We have a couple little places. We have a need for 2 more crossing guards. These are part-time, not very expensive. This is, I'm going to guess, somewhere around a $6,000 cost annually to fill those spots where we need crossing guards. We'd like to increase the health aide hours. This is an opportunity for us to put more health aides, not nurses, but health aides in clinics across the district where we don't have coverage all day long in every building. So this is one way of increasing some coverage at some of our buildings by increasing their hours. And that's not more staff, that's just more hours to some of the staff we have currently. One of the interesting places, and I put this one on as a demonstration of how the staff is working within the confines of the money they have available for them to do things that we want to do as part of strategic planning, but doing it by looking at current resources and allocation. So within some of our title funds, the elementary division took a look at our use of title funds and reallocated some of those funds because they thought what we were doing with those weren't as effective as we'd like. So let's drop what we're doing we don't think is making the biggest bang for a buck. And where they'd like to put some funds is to pick up some guidance counselors to support the elementary program. I take you back to Tammy Santa's presentation a few weeks ago when she talked about the gap in elementary guidance counselors. Here's a way where our staff is looking at reusing money we have without going more in the general fund. So I put that up there because there's a lot of that goes on as we redistribute jobs. So if we were to move forward next year, these are the areas where we think that $450,000 allocation to fill some needs. Some are mandatory, some are opportunities for kids, some are just operational. But after listening to Mr. Griffith's presentation, I'd ask you to think of a consideration for additional resources and why. Fundamentally, the first piece is the strategic plan from the community points to community desire for more program, particularly locally developed curriculum. Much of what we have had to allocate our resources to, particularly in human resources, have been to areas that have functioned mostly as state mandates, federal mandates, either because of testing, resident educator, any of those components that we know of that have been coming in place that have effectively been unfunded mandates where we've had to allocate staff. And that leaves us with some blank spots in our curriculum that we felt we wanted to get at. And so here you have an opportunity, as Mr. Griffith showed, to look at our community's resources and our funds and an ability to meet some demands that they have said they'd like to have. Secondly, it just fundamentally goes about improving opportunities for students. That's the fundamental piece here. Talking about additional resources to provide staff and programs that make opportunities for kids. And I can quantify some of that for you as we go along. And the most important thing is we want to maintain a balance, and this again is in strategic planning, where the community said, if you're doing these things, do it in consideration of the 5-year forecast, which serves as your guidepost moving forward. And as you can see, there's kind of a bright light on that path from that 5-year forecast, particularly if you factor in, and you never like to, you never want to project before it's in your pocket, so to speak, but when you start to look at what's going to happen with the state budget to Westerville, what Mr. Griffith presented today might step up and is even better. And as that point, so I want to look at those components. Using that 5-year forecast as a measuring stick for me as superintendent, I wouldn't come here if I didn't think we could sustain the request against the 5-year forecast. We can maintain that. So why now? Well, here's what you saw this evening. We've got a 5-year forecast where our projected revenues are better than expected. We've seen improved efficiency, which has maintained expenditures and kept us as a positive trajectory. You have the impact of retirement. We saw that this evening with all the teachers that are retiring and part of the STRS. You have the potential of an improved additional state resources that aren't accounted for right now. And what that leaves you at the end of the day is a healthy fund balance. And there's two forms of that in there. And Mr. Griffith, feel free to correct me anyway along the line. But as you know, as a board, you've directed the treasurer to set aside in the cash reserve $19 million, which represents about 45 days operating cash. And that money is set aside strictly for that. But on top of that, if you read that 5-year forecast carefully, I'd point to, for example, FY17, where in addition to the $19 million that you've set aside, you still have a cash balance of $59.7 million, which continues to grow. And if some of these other factors play in, they're going to get even bigger. And so you're in a position where you have dollars available. Let's do something for kids and create some opportunities for kids would be the why. At the start of the year, I made it my goal and shared with board leadership that I was going to spend some time this year with our leadership team reviewing various parts of our curriculum program where oftentimes these are blank spots, blind spots, things that we're not paying attention to because mandates have our eyes averted to another place. So example would be third grade reading guarantee. When we brought on reading teachers to meet the third grade reading guarantee, when we had to do with resident educator programs, all those pieces that we had to do kept us from paying attention to other parts. So I had various members of our administrative staff take time this year to review those programs, to look at staffing, to look at courses, to look at the number of kids taking them, and give us some reports back as a leadership team to tell us what we saw. And so these represent areas in our curriculum that folks have done presentations on, that we've looked at where we think we have some pretty significant gaps and could create some opportunities for kids. And I didn't get into exact FTEs here because I think some of these, it would be preliminary to put FTE here until we have conversation at the building levels with teachers and principals to talk about how we beef it up if indeed we go down this direction. But I don't want to have those conversations, invite people to the table, talk about additional resources unless I know I have something available to me to use as a guidepost. So these areas we've looked at, and I can give you some, I can quantify some of this for you in terms of the gap. So let's take secondary world languages. This year, through the scheduling process in high school where kids choose courses, we had approximately 150 students at the high school level who wanted to take American Sign Language who couldn't take it because we don't have enough FTE. We had another 40 students who can't take French because we don't have enough FTE. At middle school, we have roughly 126 middle school students who requested Spanish, and because of FTE, we can't do that. In art, it's really bad. We had 850 students who requested art on their schedule, and we can't fill the request because we don't have enough staff. So those are some examples. I can point to elementary gifted. Here, the self-contained program, where in one grade level, we're running 2 sections, which is about 50 kids. The other 2 grade levels, we're running 1 section. And the fact that we're only running 1 section means some kids whose score for the gifted would normally qualify them, but because we don't have enough FTE, we can't serve them. So there's lots of that within here. There's also places of growth as we continue to grow a College Credit Plus model. We've done some great work there. In our recent IB review from the external review, a couple of areas, they pointed out the secondary world language and the secondary fine arts, and that we have students enrolling in the IB program at South who, because of staffing, can't get into the courses necessary for the diploma program in world languages and fine arts. We also have spent time trying to figure out how to fulfill the mandate for an IB coordinator. At one point, we had a teacher who was part-time teacher, part-time coordinator, but in order to fill student requests, we put that person back to full-time teaching. We put the responsibilities of the IB coordinator, which are pretty heavy, particularly during testing time, which was with all the other testing time going at the same time. We put that in assistant principal at the high school. It's a pretty high level demand. I also fundamentally believe that until we take an approach that IB is a district-level program for high school students, and we package that way, and we deliver it that way, I think we're going to continue to have, that program is going to underserve potential population of students. So creating some leadership there for recruitment, working with parents, working with teachers, working with the testing piece would be an area of interest. So these are some of the academic programs where we see opportunities for kids and for growth and making better programs. It's in the academic side. There's some operations and administration, not as heavy, mostly because for me it's student opportunities first. But there are some areas, for example, in custodians and maintenance. We've added buildings back in. We took a significant cut in our custodial staff during the levy campaign for the renewal, for the emergency levy in 12. We've left ourselves a little bit short there over time, and actually our staffing level there is below the recommendations that came from an audit prior to that cut year. So there are places where we could pick up some extra help and address that. There are also some areas of supervision. You know, you don't think about these things. In fact, they don't even tell you these in superintendent schools some days. But things like playground inspection for safety, bleacher inspection for safety. And I was in Bexley when the St. Charles stands fell apart, and remember seeing that, the onset of that. And I know we have a very enthusiastic student section in most of our high schools that put a lot of pressure on our bleachers. So these are places where we've lost support and have put responsibilities on folks, but they kind of represent important areas that we probably want to take a look at and see if we can do some work there. Support staff, again, is another area we've particularly in the buildings, when you think of some of the work that, when you cut back one support staff member at a building, the work doesn't go away, it just shifts to someone else's desk. Then add the mandates, and I can tell you testing season this spring was part of that, where all of a sudden the workload in those offices get to be pretty heavy. Those are some places. IT, as we continue to support the teaching and learning roadmap, we want to make sure we have the right infrastructure in place, safety, security. Mr. Byrd, you'd be interested, we had a conversation today about cyber insurance protection. You have to fill me in. English as a second language is an area where we have struggled to improve performance for several years, and I think fundamentally we're at a point where we're really got to take a look at the leadership model there. I think the people who are in charge of it want to do good work. I'm not so sure that we have the right resources there to move the needle, and that becomes important as we start looking at data and the gaps. So those are some areas, nothing too hefty there. Two other minor ones. I'm in favor and would recommend bringing back department facilitators at the secondary level. Fundamentally, we need to increase teacher voice in our curriculum instruction program. And by removing that leadership at the building level, we've diminished principals' abilities at the secondary level to get feedback from teachers about what's working in the classroom. At a time period in which our teachers have fundamentally experienced significant change in the content that they teach, the design of that content, the implications for instruction, and most importantly, the assessments that become a big part of their accountability and our accountability. And I think it's not an expensive venture to add some leadership there and boost teacher opportunities to help us understand where we need to be to help kids. Nurses piece is just, again, looking at some additional time. You talk about medically fragile children and coverage and the heyday, the busy day of any school, having those clinics covered more than we do now is part of that, and the paperwork that comes with it. There shouldn't be, from an operations standpoint, if you're a fourth grade teacher who inherits a child who's got bee sting or peanut allergies, you don't want to wait 2 weeks to get the notification from the nurse that you have a special child in your class who has significant medical needs. And so, yeah. So making sure that we have appropriate staffing there so we can deliver services and support kids in classrooms is important. So those are some areas that we have seen as blank spots, weak spots that we think could be boosted. So what does that mean? What I'd ask tonight is consideration if you look at that 5-year forecast. Currently, you're allocating $450,000 each year through the 5-year forecast. What I'm asking for this evening is a consideration to increase that for the next 2 years and then return it back to its $450,000 mark in the 5-year forecast in the third year. And I'd like to be able to have the opportunity to use that additional funds, which would mean over 2 years where you'd normally spend 2 times 450, 900,000. I'm talking about 2 times 900,000 over the next 2 years, 1.8 million. It's an additional $900,000 allocation over the next 2 years in your 5-year forecast. 800,000 of which was made up just between the difference between projected revenues and expenditures that Bart saw this evening. And I do that having spent lots of time talking with Mr. Griffith and looking at our 5-year forecast and thinking about the long-term implications of that. Here's what I think it does for you. It keeps you in the, it keeps us in the public eye in terms of what we're allocating for staff during a time of enrollment, flat enrollment. It keeps us in a position to add some programming back that the community said is important to kids. It always means, as we look at 5-year forecasts, because you'll do this again in October, that if we're seeing the forecast take a dip in a different direction for whatever reason, we can make modifications. So it's not an open checkbook. It's a opportunity for us to do some work. And I present it that way as 1.8 over the next 2 years because honestly, we need the opportunity, and we need it now, to be able to go back and talk with teachers and principals about what can we do immediately. Because if you're a high school principal or elementary or a middle school principal, your master schedule is about in the books, which means your teaching assignments and the kids' schedules. And if you've never done a master schedule, the second you plop in another teacher, you disrupt the whole process and you're back to square one. At the middle school level, when you start adding electives, et cetera, that changes the rotation in their building, all those pieces. So there are places where we could beef up and add tomorrow and meet kids' needs and not do any of that with limited conversation. There are places where we need conversation throughout next year, but what does that mean for opportunities for kids and what's the best way to do that? So I'm not looking at it as 900, I'm looking at as 1.8 over 2 years that we could do to fill some of those gaps. So, and continue to use that 5-year forecast as a monitoring tool. Lot to digest. I appreciate the time I've had to present this evening and the time I've had to talk with you over the last couple of weeks, and happy to take any questions.
Who's going first?
Go ahead. I've got,
You got a bunch?
no,
Oh,
not really.
John, thank you. You answered several of the things that I was going to ask, but there are some pieces that are missing from the presentation tonight, and I would like to get a sense from you as regards when or if you plan to address issues around facilities and transportation. A lot of the pieces that we see in your presentation are putting back components and opportunities that have been missing from the district for some time, putting them back sometimes in different ways, but providing the opportunities that are necessary. But there are some things missing. What do you want to do about that?
So I'll talk about facilities first because we actually, as we looked at a healthy 5-year forecast, the board did some fixing to that earlier this year when we did the Point View project and you moved money from the permanent improvement funds back to the general fund. Mr. Rose picked up additional dollars out of that. Now then immediately the first 2 years of that went back to Point View, which we're happy to do. The other side is transportation, which is an area, particularly within our athletic department, that I'm concerned about. So I would like to, in weighing out what to bring to the table as we look at the impact in the 5-year forecast, I would like to, in the fall, visit both those issues. I'd like to have Mr. Reeves in the fall come back and talk about the transportation issue and the budgets as it relates to athletics. Bob Lynn to talk a little bit about where we are. And actually, sorry, I'm a little over the map on this one. If we back up, last year you approved shortening the walking distances to the bus stops. So I do think that's an area we want to look at. Where I think it's most impactful is athletic transportation, where at this time we're not transporting both ways in a lot of instances, and I think we're leaving some families in tough spots. The facilities piece, I'd like to revisit again next year as we get Point View rolling. We can look at the 5-year forecast again in October and in May to see if the board feels there's room, and if Mr. Griffith feels there's room, to make additional allocations to Mr. LaRose, so we can address some issues there, because there are some weak spots there. But I felt that this time in weighing out where to go next, we did some facilities, improved that, feel good about that. Felt there was time for opportunities for kids.
So $1.8 million over the 2 years. There are an awfully lot of needs that grew out of the crisis that the district was going through, the additional responsibilities that we have as regards what we need to do with the state and so forth. So how confident are you that this particular approach, this 1.8, will actually, when it's added to the 450, will be sufficient to meet the needs that you've identified?
It's a great question, because it's a ceiling question. And what I know is that there's always more we can do for kids. But at the same time, you have to do that given the resources available to you through the community. And the community's been very generous, put the renewal in place. The state's improving the direction they go. So this is a conservative approach early on to see what opportunities we can create and where that leaves us next. So I would say to you, there's a ton of opportunities we could do. But this gives us a 2-year plan that can be revised anytime during the 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, see where we're at, and we can revisit the conversation about where we're at and where we want to go. Whether or not, we also need to keep an eye on enrollment projections and make sure that those hold still. So it's a conservative step in the right direction, but it won't satisfy everybody.
So as you've looked at these positions and as you've considered where you want to go and who you want to talk to about this, have you looked at redistribution and reallocation of existing positions?
We've been doing that for the last 2 years, making changes at the elementary level in particular, for example, where using current staff and retirement opportunities. Barb Wallace and her team have plans in place so that next year every single elementary will have an instructional coach, a professional teacher who will have the opportunity to work with teachers in the classroom with job-embedded PD on professional development. It's a known, research-based, outcome-based professional development model that we think adds value. And so we went in that direction. Why do we do that? Because as we looked at our 3rd grade reading scores and our reading program overall, we felt that we had the opportunity to move some of those staff and not really upset performance. So we went in that direction. The guidance counselor for elementaries I showed this evening is another example of the kinds of places we do that. As we look at PE, the board approved the policy that allowed the PE waiver at high school for athletics, which over time is going to have an impact on PE enrollment at the high school, creates an additional opportunity as we have retirements there for reallocation of those either to PE in the middle school, or other kinds of position like business programs that we want to add. So we're always got an eye towards shifting things around to meet demands and needs as the playing field changes. So those are a couple examples.
You made a couple of points I think are really important. You talked about the negative impact that the cuts over the past few years had on our secondary as well as on our elementary. But when you start laying out the numbers of kids who cannot get in those courses, it's kind of disingenuous to say we offer courses that we know we have no likelihood of staffing. And this brings us back to where we need to be with that. The other point that I thought was extremely important to consider as we look at the list is your comment about filling our full-time gifted classes with kids who obviously hit the score, but knowing that there were a number of kids who hit the score that we couldn't put into the classes, even though they needed that particular level of instruction because we didn't have the staff. That is unacceptable in so many ways when we talk about meeting the needs of kids. You also talked about the generosity of the community. That is very true. The community has been remarkably generous, but it's not just blind generosity. You know, if you think about what the community has done, they have stated the people who participated, many people who participated in the creation of the strategic plan. They laid out very clearly for us what they expect this educational system to look like. when the people of this community decided to vote in favor of the levy that we've been talking about so much tonight, they did that making their opinions very clear to us about what kind of educational system they expected. So for us to sit on the funds and not spend the funds that the community said they wanted spent on what they wanted it spent on seems to me to be, this sounds very, very melodramatic, but I do believe this. It is almost to the point of malfeasance. It's holding the dollars with the direct intentionality of not spending them for what the people of the community said they wanted and what we said we would give them. Your plan moves us to where we need to be. It gives our students the things that they need to have, as many of them as we can give them, and it meets what the community said that it wants from its school system, and does it well within the bounds of what we're talking about with a 5-year forecast, without even considering the increases that we are likely to see but have not yet been guaranteed. So, Bart, my last question is, John said that this fits within the sustainability. As I look at your documents, it fits within the sustainability. Do you believe this plan fits within sustainability?
I do. This, like I said, the state right now favorably, we're roughly at 7.5%. And so that's roughly, what do I say, $2 million a year. Cumulative, that's close to $20 million a year. John and I talked about this earlier. We also took the $3 million into account from what we said we were going to move from the permanent improvement back in here. We also played with those numbers and from what the state is doing increase-wise, what we think maybe potentially insurance-wise, instead of being 10% next year, maybe you're at 5 or someplace else. I just played with those numbers, and we're pretty much where we said we would be in 5 years anyway. Having spent as much cash balance, where we said we would be in 5 years. So even spending that money, it really much offsets what we're receiving extra on top of that. So in 2019, we're pretty much going to have the same cash balance where we thought we would be anyway, even spending with what John's talking about, even with moving the $3 million in from the capital outlay in, but taking consideration what we think we're going to receive from the state. So yeah, I mean, the numbers are there. It makes sense to try it. Like I said, if it doesn't work, and keep in mind, John's 2-year plan is for fiscal year 16 and fiscal year 17. Fiscal year November of 16 is a potential renewal levy. So if we don't have a sense of what that levy is going to do for us in November of 17, he may want to pull the reins back a little bit. I mean, for at least 1 year, you can try it. In the second year, there's some considerations you've got to look at because you're going to potentially ask for a levy renewal in November of 17, which is in the middle of John's second year. So we'll have to see what the community thinks about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Bart. Thank you, John.
Let me just follow up with Nancy's questions. A couple of them where she's already asked that I was thinking about. And I want to say thank you for thinking, in advance and anything that we can do to help our students, our children improve the opportunities that certainly we do need to get some of those back. Especially, I keep hearing from the taxpayers about the middle school. We weren't doing enough. We kind of took away from them maybe too much. And so a lot of them had 2 study halls. Well, that's unacceptable for middle school students. They're lucky to sit still for 1. But so at any rate, hopefully, I know that we may not be able to do all of these things. I'm thinking that you're probably looking at what we need, prioritize them and so on. And my concern on the 2-year issue is that, after 2 years, then what? That's my only big concern. We don't want to just, take on and bite so much off that we can't chew it for a long period of time. We don't want to take anything away. So that, and I know you're keeping that in mind, along with working with Bart in terms of, in case, the levy doesn't get renewed, then we're in an issue. But certainly we need to do some more for the students and offer some of these opportunities. And it's, you know, the money's there, and you're only asking, I'm assuming you're not thinking that you can cover all of those issues with 900,000. Okay. The whole list, each year. So that's my only concern as a board member, that, you know, we don't give and then have to take away again.
I think that's an important point when you tie the cycle of the levy renewal and then that Bart refers to. I do, and I, from what Dr. Nestor Baker said, as I put the whole thing together, if you look at strategic planning, the members who participate, over 300, said more opportunities for kids. The phrase "more than core" was something that came out of that. And so you have the resources to meet that need. You then think about that in terms of the community's perceptions of a renewal, no new taxes, sustain where we're at. And if you look at what the impact of the renewal is, because in Bart's official forecast, you got to back it out.
Right.
But if you pop it back in and you look at 18 and 19, the expenditures and revenue things looks a whole lot different going on out. So you go to 12 was a emergency levy, renewal in 17, no new taxes. You're putting yourself in a position for long term from 12 on out of not having to look for any additional dollars, no new millage for maybe 8, 9, 10 years. What you did in emergency, you said be good for 5. You stretch 5 to 7 or 8, and put some things back in place for kids, opportunities for kids, and take care of some infrastructure needs, some building needs. I think you've shown good stewardship to the community and positioned yourself nicely.
Right. And I like to justify the 19 million that is on the reserve. I mean, it's like having your own checkbook where you have a savings, and it's only good for 45 days. But at least we have finally established that, and I feel good about that. So that's something that I feel like we shouldn't touch unless it's an emergency. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate all your thoughts that went into this.
So if I can harp on the economics of the operating reserve for just a second, because I want to tie this back into something we're very familiar with. I know that we talked a little bit at kind of the personal checking account, but there's a very interesting behavior of money. One, if you work in the corporate sector, you're very familiar with, which the personal example of this is that how many of you have ever experienced when your checking account at some point in your life was down to your last $27? That's when your car breaks. Right? Or that's when the furnace goes out, and that's when there's crisis, right? And yet, when you have money in the bank, it seems that money follows money, that opportunity follows, and there aren't, when the roof needs to be redone, there's not a wringing of hands in deciding whether or not you're going to choose to eat or put the roof on, right? Having that operating reserve is what gives us the financial leverage, and one thing you know about money is that if your finances are healthy, they don't stay healthy as long as you continue to stay diligent and stand true on your principles, which for us is a 5-year plan. They get healthier, right? And that's what we're operating from. When I look at the plan, I'm actually a little bit concerned, echo a little bit about some of my fellow board members' positions, but a little bit more, I guess, more bluntly. And that would be that I feel like we may be being conservative to the point of being constrictive. I'm, not to throw a monkey wrench into the discussion, but I'm more inclined to see a figure on that short-term increase on a 2-year increase at the $600,000 level. I've gone through the numbers. I've gone through the 5-year plan. It's absorbable. I do need to agree with Dr. French about, we have to keep an eye on that post 2 years, right? And what does that look like? And do all of these potential positive windfalls, fall in line, right, so that we can continue to operate? But when I talk to the community, what we hear consistently is gifted and talented, IB, and supporting services, particularly around guidance counselors. And this is what the community wants. And I think what's really, really important here in this discussion and talking about this increased discussion is that this board has shown itself not to be resigned to the issues that are being caused by us being constrained in core curricula, from the state and from the federal government, right? Because what we focused on is outside of those demands, what does the community want? Because we have our hand on the rudder for the school district in being able to steer it in a way that our community wants their students to be taught, the type of programming that they want, right? And that means that we don't put all of our focus, all of our money, all of our effort into that core. We focus on those things that differentiate us as a district. And all of these components are outside of that discussion, right? And all of these components will add value to our students, to our families, and our community, because it's what they're asking for. Back to Nancy's statement. This is what our community, what our parents and our teachers are asking for. I think it's really incumbent upon us to deliver. I think 450 is a little light. The differentiator for me is that, back to an important term that you use, stewardship. We go back nearly 15 years on an audit, and the state said that 60% of our building fleet should be replaced. We have maintenance issues. We have things that we need to stay on top of that give the right educational universe for our students in the physical facilities. We need to put some attention into those. I would like to see us pushing the holistic plan that's inclusive of all staff functions to make sure that we're delivering exactly what the community is asking for.
Too many notes. I'm not going to go over all of them. I do appreciate, Carol, your emphasis, and Richard, you picked it up, that I really just dislike this, what would you call it, a boomerang kind of, put a few things out, a couple of years later, pull a few things back, put a thing. And I just think that's got to create craziness for teacher, staff, and students. My simple notes were, I said, okay, the community was involved in the creation of this strategic plan. The strategic plan helped to create some of these areas in which we want to focus on. I, too, feel a little bit that that we're almost not being bold and big enough. But that's not for me. That's not me saying to change the dollar amount. That's me saying let's try to move forward with perhaps this proposal, and see if we generate some exciting opportunities for children, for students. Students are, I think, excited when you touch different places in their core. And if there are that many students out there that get excited about education through artistic expression, I do not have an artistic bone in my body, but I love the people that do. I value so much the idea of creating more opportunities for our students. The only other piece that I had is that it seems to me that this is also creating support and encouragement for our staff and teaching corps as well, because we're saying what you do is so valuable. We want to provide more opportunity to support what you are doing. You talked about department heads and facilitators, or whatever kind of language. For out of our entire budget, $900,000 over 2 years. I'm with you absolutely on the 19 million. Hold it, and just keep that to the side in case our furnace breaks and all kinds of things occur. But I'm looking at the slide. I don't know which slide it is. Opportunities enhanced for academic programs. The 7-8 pieces there, and I am authentically excited to see the possibility of moving forward with some of these areas, and getting kids into programs that they want and that can enhance their educational experience, and supporting teachers and staff along that journey as well.
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts, so I hope you can stick with me. First, when we create opportunities for these kids, we increase student achievement, which is why we are all sitting up here. That's what we want to do. So thank you for putting this list together. I like how it touches all the different levels. I will tell you, I can kind of go through here and I can see things when you say secondary, fine arts, and we now offer art just in 7th grade. I mean, it's not okay. So I agree with everyone else. I kind of wish we would shoot for the stars and ask for more. I think our kids deserve it. When I'm looking through here, some of these things, elementary gifted, definitely see expanding there. I also want to think down the road. We were talking about looking at things 2 years. So this program, we have 2 at the 4th grade level, 1 at 5th, 2 4th grades, 1 5th grade, 1 3rd grade. So would we be expanding 3rd and 5th? And if so, I think we need to be mindful of where it's housed and the building we're doing there, because then we would be talking moving kiddos, and it does concern me, so. Thoughts?
So that's where it goes back to, rather than prematurely recommending numbers of teachers and places, knowing what resources we have, what kind of dollars the board's willing to allocate to this, let's just go back and look at those variables. So when you think about the gifted self-contained program and its housing over at Emerson, classroom space there. Well, the other thing we have is we're adding 1st grade back to the magnet schools next year, so that's 3 classrooms. As we look at kindergarten, all-day kindergarten, we've had discussion about adding kindergarten. Doesn't make much sense not to have kindergarten at the magnet schools. Whether it's half day or all day is what we have to look at as we look at the all-day kindergarten program. Well, that's 3 classrooms. So actually, Mr. LaRose and I are scheduled tomorrow to go over to Emerson and Hamby to take a look at the inventory of classroom spaces that exist today to figure out how that all fits. So yeah, I mean, there's always ripple effects to space. We ran into that with the engineering design course at the middle schools. Actually, we ran into an interesting one where the equipment we needed to take off the fab lab couldn't fit through the door into the classroom. We had to do some modifications. That's one of those, you didn't think about that one at the time, and you kick yourself, but it happened. So that's why I think it's very important to be thoughtful and get the right people in the room to help with the planning and implementation. That includes teachers and principals, people like Jeff LaRose, facilities, so that we don't miss something or disrupt a potential opportunity down the line. I think that's an important piece. So to the point, I'll be at Emerson Hamby tomorrow counting classrooms to see how they're used.
And please know, I wasn't saying slow down. I was saying make it fit, but be mindful to the kids that are there and the ones that, potentially may have to find a new home. So, I think that's it for now. Do you have something else you were going to say?
So you are requesting a short-term increase, $450,000 each year over the next 2 years, but basically you're looking at the entirety of 1.8 million. Now, as we've discussed this, I heard Richard say he believes it should be $600,000 each year for, a more significant push forward. Tracy, I think I heard you say, do what we can do. So where I'm going now is, do we want to do a motion so that you know what you're doing? And if so, what do we want to move?
And the last time we did this quickly, we had to go back and do it again. So can we ask you to put something together?
Well, he's proposing are you
He
proposing
is,
to-
but we're also saying that I take it that we're okay with shoot for the stars. Let's figure out what you really do need.
Well, I don't
think she
know.
is.
Did you hear me?
There's
Sustaining.
Allocate an
The
additional
two-
$900,000 across 2 years.
Let's bite off a little instead of
I
biting
said,
off everything.
Let's,
So here's and Bart, feel free to pipe in, is I understand how the logistics of this work. A resolution would certainly codify the request of some sort. On the other side is you're functioning within a 5-year forecast which has projection increases of $450,000. You're not wedded to that by any means. Where the other opportunity for the board to make decisions on staffing increases comes is when we bring positions forward for action. I think in terms of whether or not it's 450, 600, and when that happens, I would say somewhere in the middle of that is when I think about what we could do now on May, today's the 15th? Right,
18th.
right, with school closing up and master schedules going, is it the 18th? Did I just know
yes.
there's a day I go to work and there's no buses on the road, and then there's a day I go to work and there's buses on the road, and so summer's over. So, I don't know, I don't know that how much more we would need.
So all you need is, we're assuming you're going to keep track of the 450 as you bring people forward for us to approve. You're keeping a tally?
Yes,
Yes, all right. So we're going to rely on you that you can do that. Do we need a motion?
No, keep in mind, sorry about the voice again, keep in mind, we're going to bring the final appropriations to the board in June 29th. And I would assume we could talk about doing staffing at that point so that when you pass the appropriations in June for next year, I'm sure Dr. Kellogg will have those items or those additional staffing in that appropriations package. We appropriate at the fund level.
Yes.
But Dr. Kellogg can certainly say at that meeting, hey, the appropriations include X number of dollars for whatever. And he can, because we really need to plan for that when we do the appropriations, not when we do the forecast. We'll have them in the forecast, but the appropriations should have what Dr. Kellogg wants to do for next year in those for June. So you really would have an opportunity in June. Dr. Kellogg could present, additional staff. He could certainly talk with all you guys, whatever, in future meetings to get an idea so that when we do present the appropriation to you at June 29th, that staffing will be part of that approval.
I think that's good. What I want to do is make sure that it is very clear publicly that we do want to see those dollars in appropriations, because boards change, times change, and I don't want you left hanging, believing you were following something that we wanted you to do, that then turned around and you ended up in a bad place because of it. So I want it to be clear that we have publicly said we want that in the appropriations. I think we've been pretty clear, haven't we?
It seems to me, all 5 of us have said that we want to move forward, providing additional opportunities, and we are taking this particular, it's not official proposal, this idea, and we're saying, we like this. Some are saying, hey, you know what, stretch that rubber band a little further. Some are saying, no, let's start where we are.
Yeah.
Let's start where we are. Bring to us a plan that has gone through some conversations with teacher staff, gone through some planning about prioritizing, and then if down the road we were to come back and say, that was awesome, but it really should be 575. Well, then that's the discussion we have at that point. But I think all 5 of us, I'm not speaking for all 5 of us, I kind of am, but I think all 5 of us are saying we like the idea of seeing expanded opportunities, particularly in these areas which were driven by community involvement in the strategic plan.
And I think publicly, all 5 of us are saying that we will approve the 450,000 he's asking for. And, that's it at this point. We haven't agreed on anything else. So, for 2 years. And as I said, I'm concerned that we do the best we can do with that kind of money, 900,000 for each year, and see what we can do with that and hopefully sustain it for years to come. But who knows?
But don't you think when Bart just presented his projections?
I
don't you
understand,
think-
and now I hear Bart, and I talked to him too. Bart's looking good. I mean, we're looking good.
looking
There's
good.
no
It's-
question as far as money.
He is looking good. So I look down this list and I see, arts need added, gifted in middle school. A lot of things need to happen in middle school. We just had 2 students, commit suicide. If we don't, we need guidance counselors, appropriate guidance counselors. I mean, there are so many things. Our libraries need to be open. We need media clerks.
Well, I think John has figured this out, and I do trust, when we talked, I do trust his ability to put, dollar figures together and realize what it's going to cost us. And he knows where the priorities are, certainly. So I'm thinking that, we hired him to do the job, do it.
Yeah, give guidance, right, and that's the ask. But I think, I'm going to kind of come around, confirm, first of all, and I agree with you, Dr. French, confirm that the board is agreeing on the $900,000 figure as guidance, within which you operate, right, which is tied to the 5-year forecast. Look, I also would, there is a point that I have to disagree with you on, which is all of us were incredulous about the possibility of meeting these programming needs with $900,000, right? I think everybody said there's some choices that are going to need to be made. So here would be my ask, right, which would be, let's proceed with the agreement, which we're already at, with the $900,000 guidance. But I would like to see, as part of those discussions, and maybe it's later in the summer or getting into the fall period, in addition to Scott and Bob and those other areas, I would like to see what pieces of programming and/or operational support we are not achieving that are not meeting the strategic plan according to the feedback that we got from the community.
Yes.
Right? You're going to have to make decisions within this 900K, right? There's going to be something that's left on the floor that the community is expecting. If we can have a discussion around the quantification of what that looks like, right, and then have that as a discussion additive to the 900K, I'm fine with that. But I think we all kind of shrank back when we saw it and said, there's no way that you're going to fill all of these programming needs and operational requirements in this 900K.
And I don't think that we are expected to do that. We're making an initial effort. We're
Yeah.
making a step, and we're going in the right direction.
Agreed.
We can't bite it off all in one big bite.
So if I'm hearing it correctly, moving forward, because the time periods between now and allocations, which is the June 29th meeting, is a critical time period for hiring. So if I'm hearing correctly, it would seem that I have guidance to move forward with an eye at 450 additional for this year. That will be reflected in the allocation that you're going to act on. If that number, for whatever reason, looks like it's going to be different than that, that additional expenditure shouldn't happen until additional board conversation. If at the end of the day, for next year, because we're talking about next year's allocation, because as I'm looking at it, and I've given thought to what I think we can do on May 18th for next year, if I got 600,000 today, I think it sounds odd, but I think it would be difficult for us to start filling some of those gaps for program opportunities. I want to be specific to that, without messing up, without appropriate planning. As we look at next year, where I have a time period for all these conversations, and we have time period for more of that, I think we're in a position to then say, and we have another look at the 5-year forecast, that might look different. But I wouldn't anticipate much different than 450,000 for next year at the time you do allocations in June.
Okay.
If so, I think I'm obligated at that point to say, the request is actually 600,000, here's why, but I probably shouldn't have hired on the assumption I was getting 600. I should hire on the assumption that 450 would be okay with the board. Is that,
That's right.
all right?
This is exciting, John. I am really excited about what you're going to do with the district.
I appreciate staff who have been, there are several people who individually spent a lot of time this year talking with teachers, talking, get input. I do know these are always dangerous things I heard boomerang effect, I heard sustainability. I'm sure there's people out there who are hearing and going, well, what about X, Y, or Z? So those are all the landmines behind a good thing, right? And so we'll be purposeful to that means and try and make it fact. I think the issue of sustainability and what we do for opportunities for kids and how do we sustain that in the current 5-year forecast, the renewal piece is a critical part of the health of the district. So no new money, no new tax renewal, that as it sits today, is not subject to the changes in law and homestead exemption. So it's a good thing for the community, and it allows us to sustain the trajectory of the 5-year forecast along all the grounds we're doing. And that this decision today, barring something catastrophe in the near future, won't modify that endpoint. And you're in a position to say, renewal, we'll wait for new money later. And I think that's been the mission from a financial perspective of this board and from what I've heard from the community, I hope. So I appreciate the confidence, I appreciate the support. There'll be some hard work, but we look forward to it. Thank you, Mr. Griffith, for your support and helping us guide us as we go along this path.
Okay. Moving on, personnel consent agenda, 9.01 through 9.10. May I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
And Lori is already at the podium to talk to us.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. Tonight's consent agenda contains 13 sections. Section 9.01 is resignation of 1 classified staff member and 1 substitute. 9.02 is resignation of 3 teachers. 9.03 is retirement of 1 classified staff member. 9.04 is retirement of an administrator. 9.05 is a leave of absence for 2 classified staff. 9.06 is leave of absence for 4 teachers. 9.07 is a change of assignment for 4 classified staff and 2 temporary change of assignments. 9.08 is change of assignment for an administrator. 9.09, a variety of one-time payments for licensed staff. Most of these occurring in May and June, a few of them in July and August. We have a variety of things from professional development to home visits for incoming kindergartners, evaluations of preschoolers, a wide range of activities all occurring over the summer. 9.10 is reemployment of 5 administrators. These are their contract renewals, 2-year contracts for classified administrators, and 9.11, reemployment and renewal of contracts for licensed administrators. There are 16 administrator contracts. 9.12, employment of 4 classified staff, 2 substitutes, and 1 summer food program worker. And 9.13, we have employment of our licensed staff. We are welcoming 2 new administrators, and they are here with us this evening. Steve Mazzy, who will be our Director of Human Resources for licensed staff, and Tyson Hilgert, who will be our Assistant Principal at Huber Ridge. We have employment of 4 teachers, 3 home instruction tutors, 2 field service supervisors, and various summer intervention and summer school teachers. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay.
You want Steve and Tyson to formally recognize themselves? I saw a little wave up there, but a name and a face might be healthy, too.
Welcome. Welcome. Any questions?
Just a quick comment. Thank you again for the responsiveness. I know this was a topic last year for getting those one-time payments into us before the actual activity, and it looks like you actually have some optics into a little further in the summer, because I know that that gets kind of tricky with board meetings and timing, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. SIOP for teachers. Tell us what that is.
SIOP stands for Sheltered Instructional Observation Protocol, and it's instructional strategies for teachers working specifically with English language learners, but it represents good instruction for all students.
It's a means of teachers designing instruction around literacy for English language learners that are not emergent learners, but have some acquisition. So by the instructional design process allows teachers to design instruction so that those kids, particularly the vocabulary that is content-based, great example from a biology teacher, so apologize. There's not a whole lot of places where you use the term endoplasmic reticulum other than a biology class. And so think about, it's not just language acquisition for the ESL student. There are a whole lot of 10th graders who might have heard that word before either. So the design of that, so it's a very research-based, evidence-based program. We used it quite effectively in my years at Southwestern. I've been pleased to see our ESL team here take interest in it, and for our teachers to take interest as they've gone through training across disciplines. A lot of them have expressed interest, and so that interest is growing.
No, I like it. And then I see down below that we have Kelly Blum going on to training. So will she then be a trainer? Is that how that works?
President Davidson, members of the board, yes, she will be a presenter for that program.
Okay. And then below that, we see Fab Lab Summit. So some of these people that, we've seen on here before. Tell us a little bit about that.
President Davidson, members of the board, I believe the summit is a collection of Central Ohio teachers, not just Westerville teachers, but folks sharing best practices across districts. So our teachers that have used the Fab Lab would be able to share best practices and ideas and programs that they've developed and designed, and give a little shout out to their students and vice versa.
Nice.
Learn from other teachers as well.
Okay. And then I'm looking for it. I apologize. There is a 4-day training for math. And it looks like they are secondary teachers. Is that?
President Davidson, members of the board, there's training in June for, yes, a 4-day training for mathematics teachers. It's my understanding that this is something being offered that has been offered at other times, and again, there's been a lot of interest generated based on feedback from the training. Some teachers may, and across all of these programs, I apologize because there are many of them on here, so it's hard for me as not the program administrator or program lead for each of these to know a lot of details. So if you have other questions, I can certainly follow up with you later. But in general, there may be points in time where we've offered something, and because of the interest level, we come around a few years later and are able to offer it again. And teachers may take an opportunity to come back to something they've already attended or to take somewhat of a refresher of it. And so if you're wondering about who participates in each of these, it's really voluntary on the part of the teachers. The majority of these are not required.
Well, I'll tell you, at the secondary level, we've received a lot of feedback about it. So I thought it was fantastic. These teachers wanted to go back for extra training or brush up or whatever. So just wondered what it was, what we were okaying. And then the last thing is more of a comment. Foundations, the phonics program is absolutely fantastic. Part of the OG Orton Gillingham, and I love seeing, it looks like mostly elementary teachers early on, and we can't do enough of that, so that's great. Just wanted to say that. So thank you. Anybody else? Sorry. Bart?
Dr. French,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Policy consent, we do not have any. Recommended old business, we do not have any, but we have some new business. First reading, recommendation to adopt and purchase secondary science resources, 12.01, and Mrs. Knapp's going to talk to us.
Good evening, and thank you. Over the course of the past year, middle school and high school teachers have been reviewing and evaluating a variety of curricular resources through the EdSite grant, which have included McGraw-Hill's Cinch, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt's Science Fusion, and physics resources. While the courses of study have been adopted over the past several years, it was the desire of the department to wait for confirmation of Ohio's new learning standards and the implementation of the Learning and Teaching Roadmap to adopt new resources. Teachers looked for resources that aligned with our content and cognitive demand standards, contained strong assessments, contained interactive features, provided labs, differentiated instruction, and had a strong digital content component. For middle school, teachers are recommending Science Fusion. For our physical science and biology, our teachers are recommending Cinch. And for AP Physics, our teachers are recommending Physics for Scientists and Engineers. And for our 2 IB Physics courses, they are recommending Physics, Principles with Applications, and Physics for the IB Diploma. Interesting to note, we received this grant, I think August of last year or the very end of July. And so the funds from the EdSite grant will provide for all of the professional developments through the end of August and for the purchase of these resources. Are there questions on the?
Now, are these books
Resources?
available to look? I know that you said they were going to be sometime
Yes.
tonight, I
Yes, they're
guess, but
over here,
we
and
didn't have-
starting tomorrow, they will be at the public library for the next 2 weeks.
Where?
The public library.
Oh, they'll
They'll be housed at the public
as
library.
you walk in, or where?
You know what? I'm not exactly sure where. I know that we have been working with the library to find a location, so I'm sure I can let you know. Once we bring the books over, I think they'll
And
get a
what's the
handle on.
purpose of that? So the public, everyone can come in?
Exactly.
Parents can come in and look? Great, that's great.
Exactly.
Good idea.
Also, we've been working on a survey similar to what we did in December or January, pardon me, allowing community members, parents, to review the resources and provide their comments. We've had a little bit of a struggle with that because with our courses of study, we wrote those, we could post them online. So some of the companies, when I say, hey, so we want to post some of your curriculum online and have anybody look at it, they're a little bit wary, particularly the AP and IB folks. They're like, we're not going to just let our college text run around out there. So there are some things that will only be available in hard copy, but we're working to get as much posted online so that everyone has access to that.
But
That's
those
been a
will be
little
over
struggle
there
for us.
starting tomorrow
Mhm,
at the
correct.
library?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's good. I'm very glad to hear that as we look at ways to open up some of our curricular decisions. When this comes back, it's going to be really important to me to have an understanding, even though it's covered by the EdSite, I still want to know what the cost is going to be for each of these, how many copies and/or seat licenses we will be receiving for each of those, and then also it'd be helpful to know what sort of professional development is going to be offered. We've had, issues occasionally in the past as we have implemented curricular materials with having problems with having sufficient and appropriate professional development. So when this comes back, I need more information.
Can I provide some of that to you right now, or would you
I
like
would
it?
be
at very-
happy to have that now,
need it
and then bring
before
it
next
back.
time,
Yeah, but I want it with our materials. If you don't have it, bring it. If you've got it, say it. How about that?
Okay, yes. For Science Fusion, it's roughly $200,000. I believe it's 191. That is the cost, and what we are requesting are 40 books per teacher. So that's a class set. We started several years ago with 35 as a class set, but we realized as we have some struggles with access that we wanted to up that number to 40. And then every student would have their own online license, and that is the same for biology and physical science as well. It would be per teacher, 40. And we do set aside some funds in our previous capital improvement budget, but our curriculum budget as we add teachers. So if we do have an increase in teachers, then we have it budgeted so that we would purchase 40 more books, hard copy, in subsequent years as needed. The cinch is, the cinch is what is $200,000. The three grade levels of Science Fusion came in We bargained with them for the past week, and we got a 10% decrease, so we were very excited about that. And so that came in just under $300,000. And for the, I don't have it delineated, but for all of the physics resources, it was about $21,000. But I can give you the breakdown for those 3 books. And that's really based because, and every student would have a book in that case for AP Physics and IB Physics. You know, it's really economies of scale, which is why we purchase a class set for those larger classes and then do the online resources. It's just not really cost effective for us to do that with AP and IB, given the numbers. One of the other components is our learning and teaching roadmap, which, as you know, we're adding about 405 teachers to that roadmap. And I think we're on track for, I'm going to forget the number, maybe 2,500 devices next year. Sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head. And every science teacher at secondary will be part of their building's phase 3, which will begin next year. So they're very excited. That was one of the reasons why they wanted to wait. I can think of a South teacher right now who said, you know, give me the devices today, when Dr. Kellogg was providing his staff chats around the roadmap. And so she had seen these products and knew what great impact they could have. So that's really exciting too, that we have those two coming together quite well.
Thank you.
Now, I did not write anything down that you just said, but I would like a copy. And I didn't understand it all.
Okay.
So would you please make a list of
Certainly.
all of the expenses involved in all of these books and all of the licenses fees and everything and the total numbers, so that we have that before we can vote on it next time?
Of course, certainly.
Either, you know, email us all.
Or I could put it in the
that or
Friday board
something.
update. Or
Yeah, we
Friday
can put
update.
it, we can put that summary in a Friday board update prior to the meeting, so you have some
That'd be
time to
great.
chew on it, and then
Thank
if you have
you.
questions, we can
Yeah,
do that. right?
sorry. And probably the next thing, too, the same will be with
Yeah.
the next item.
Well, before we jump to the next item, because I think it's going to be relative to both, is that I have to admit, I feel a little bit lost on this, and I just may not have been paying attention. I had no idea this was coming up on the agenda today.
Okay.
And
It's just
I-
the first reading.
yeah, I know it's a first reading, but kind of back to some of the questions. And again, this is my own kind of bridge to cross, you know, getting information from board members as we get socialized to it. I don't understand how all the pieces plug together, right? I don't understand how this bolts into, you know, strategic roadmap for learning. I don't understand, you know, the cost dimensions, and kind of getting an opportunity for a pre-read on these types of things. It kind of always helps us to be prepared. It just would help me, because like I said, I'm glad it's a first reading, because if it was a second, I may have to just kind of like say, I'm holding off until I get more information. But like I said, some of it may just be me trying to catch up. It's pre-construction season, so, you know, I'm spending all my liaison time with my key contact here, right? So, but it would help me. So.
Yeah.
Well, we can put some bullet points, budget, the relationship to the roadmap. In short, it really works like this. Correct me if I say it wrong, Jen, but what you heard her say is classroom sets of 40,
Correct.
because that means in the classroom, every kid will have a hard copy if that's what they choose. But all of the materials that you're buying there have digital content associated with it. So teachers now have, because they'll have devices, the opportunity for kids in the classroom to use either the hard copy book or find the copy online. The reason for 40 in a classroom set is the access issue. Kids who don't have access at home,
Yeah.
internet access, will have a hard copy they can take home, or if that's what they prefer to do. So we're working with teachers to bridge the gap between traditional hard copy textbooks and online content along the way. So that's where those two come together. So the marriage of third round of power users at the school saying, hey, you know, the science teachers are getting digital new materials with lots of digital content. Let's put the devices in their rooms, and they go, yay, that's good for me. And so that's how the two come together. The dollar piece of it is a function. The other piece of that is the Ed Psych grant, which was one of our straight A grants with other groups. Within that, teachers, our teachers who participated were trained to examine digital content using a rubric to determine its alignment with the content standards and the quality of the digital content. So what's being what they're presenting for adoption here, our teachers have already vetted it from that lens and said, this is good digital content of the ones we've looked at. And so they've already had the experience of doing that, how to use it. So it's a double. So we'll put together a briefing and so you have some time to read that before we actually have to act on the motion.
Could you, when you take these books to the library, could you put a little note maybe beside each one, the cost or something, so that we don't
could do
wait till
the-
Friday to get the update? I
You
mean,
could do the one-page summary. I think that would probably be
I
the-
would assume they're going to give you a room or a special place to put these.
Right
I
now,
don't
we have
know.
a table, but I'm not,
Where?
it's a table.
Table?
Somewhere in the front where it can be you
In
know,
that
somewhat
front area?
supervised is as much as I can tell you. I
Okay.
can't tell you exactly.
Yeah, put something there would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, do you have anything?
I was just going to, can I dovetail on what John was saying for just a second? The digital piece of it is important to me, and I want to make sure I understood that some of the earlier grades, I think 6, 7, 8, some of the physical sciences, 40 books, digital content associated with that. As we get fewer students, AP, IB, et cetera, it might just be
No, it's-
physical.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, I was just going to say, it
It-
might just be physical book and not digital content?
It's both, but what we haven't chosen to do is, okay, so we have 1,200 students who are taking sixth grade science.
Okay.
roughly. So we have 40 books, and let's say we have, 10 teachers. So we have 400 books and 800 or 1,200 licenses. You
Right.
know, we purchase 800 additional because the first, 400 come with it. So when we get into, which is a very cost-effective approach for us, and we
Sure.
found that we think 40 is a much more doable number than 35, given, as Dr. Kellogg mentioned, some of the access issues that we have had. But as you get into an AP Physics class, where there's one class per building, maybe two, it just doesn't make good sense to have one class set of books and, the other class has to be online. It just doesn't make logistical sense to do that. It's not such an economy of scale to where it makes it an economically good decision.
Yeah, great, that's just great. I just misheard you, thank you.
Yes, so
That's
they
great.
do have both, yes.
Great, thank you.
You good? Okay. So I went through some of the books back there. The Fusion ones, they're workbooks. So when you say some of the kids will get to do it at home, digital, online, the workbook, I assume those papers will be printed off and given to the kids that need to borrow the book? How will that work?
Science Fusion actually has two components. They have, well, three components. They have the digital component.
Right?
They have the hardback text, and they have the workbook. What we are wanting to do, and we're working with the company, is to have those workbook pages within Schoology so that students wouldn't have to carry around those workbooks. But for the next several years, every student will get that workbook as well. What it allows the teacher to do is we kind of live in both the digital and print world, is to use both as they see fit.
So is the hard copy book the same as the workbook then?
It is not, no.
It is not. So those aren't the books back there.
The hard copy book is the classed set that stays there. The workbook is what every student
I'm
will
just
get.
saying back there. Okay. And then when you had, or when teachers looked at these, how many teachers per grade? And did you have a teacher from each school?
Yes, and I'm going to have Autumn McCormick answer that question, as she can talk through all of the teachers that participated. Sure. And I want to thank Autumn for her work. She will be returning to the classroom, so thank you. This has been a huge project for her.
Hi, thank you for having me. For the pilots, we had approximately 16 teachers from 6 through 12 actually pilot our materials. We had representation from 6 of our 7 buildings. Heritage did not have a representative. But we did invite a heritage representative to come when we made our final selection so that they could be part of the conversation. And I think we met on March 13th with that. We had about 3 additional rubrics that the teachers went through besides the Ed Site rubric, which was very encompassing.
So tell me from just your experience, I like this, I see the digital lessons, and I tried to go on and look at one, because, I mean, it says delivered in a completely different way. So kids can be learning in all different ways, because it talked about all the what's your thought on that? What's your opinion?
I think right now that we're in kind of a unique stage where students are learning in so many different styles and avenues. And so with using something like Science Fusion, it provides the students with a hands-on resource that they need and to make references to write in, which is incredibly important for our students to engage in inquiry and design, and the workbook will help allow them to establish that. But the digital content will kind of allow them to approach the content in a slightly different way, potentially engage and pull them into the resource and the content, and to allow them to kind of explore in a different manner. So it's really kind of getting at 2 different things, and I like, particularly with Science Fusion, that it is slightly different. So often kids will, you know, maybe hear something that the teacher is saying, and then they'll click online, it's the exact same thing, and they're like, oh, that's not really helping them. And the nice thing about Science Fusion is that it allows that versatility.
Okay. Any other questions?
I can see where the department chairs will be a big help in this
Yes,
thing.
yes.
The supplemental contract that I mean, it is going to be a supplemental, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because you said it didn't cost much. I remember that.
Of course.
Actually, I remember the dollar figure. But
Okay.
So that would be a big help, because how many different textbook companies did you look at?
Well, what's interesting is through EdSite, we had so many different publishers that we were able to take a look at their materials. And we have really been looking at materials for several years now as the state was trying to adopt their new learning standards. In science, there was a whole other movement for the next generation standards that was happening at the national level. And for a long time, Ohio wasn't necessarily sure which way they were going to go. And so at that same time, even though they had produced Ohio's new learning standards, there was some talk that they could still shift. And obviously that caused us to pause and make sure that everybody had made the final decisions before we went forward and selected resources. And then it was just kind of coincidence that the digital content and the Ed Site and all of our initiatives that we're working with in the district kind of happened. It was like a perfect storm, so to speak, for science. And, you know, one of the things I always want to say is, you know, science is STEM, so it's the science, the technology, the engineering, the mathematics, and having that technology piece is really going to help our students move to the level and really get to those opportunities that we can provide. So it's exciting.
It is exciting, thank you.
I think you need to get a little more excited about this, though. I just sensing that.
No, I'm gearing up for PD.
That's awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So the handouts that are in the back for the board members, if you didn't grab one, very beneficial.
Oh, thanks.
So
No,
grab
I
one on
didn't.
your way.
They should have links on them as well, so you could dig in.
Yeah, they do, yes.
They
yes,
have
yes,
what?
yes. There's links on there that
Oh,
you
I
can
thought
go.
it said legs. Okay, thank you.
12.02, if you would like to move on, would be great.
Sure. Westerville City Schools has collaborated with Columbus State Community College to provide our students access to College Credit Plus, which allows students to earn college and high school credit at the same time. The purpose of this is to promote rigorous academic pursuits and to provide a wide variety of options to college-ready students. 3 courses in the logistics pathway will require new resources, and 1 in the health pathway will require resources as well. Per our agreement for this year, Columbus State Community College will be paying for these texts for the upcoming school year. And I can get the costs of those as well. I don't have those off the top of my head quite. For the logistics pathway, we are asking that understanding business, customer service, a practical approach, and discovering computers with Microsoft Office 2013 be utilized. And for medical terminology, the book is called Medical Terminology, Get Connected. Our teachers began their PD around these new courses at the yearly adjunct faculty training on April 15th at Columbus State, which allowed them the opportunity to connect with lead adjunct faculty. Teachers will continue their professional development with curriculum work this summer to connect with industry lead faculty and course content. They'll have release days throughout the course of the next year as well. And one thing that we want to consider as we kind of dip our toe into College Credit Plus is we're really needing to lean on the department at the college because they are truly the group that selects this resource. So we'll want to keep that in mind as we bring forth different courses of study and corresponding resources that we are really needing to do that in collaboration. This isn't something, we're not really at the stage to say, well, we want to offer this course, but we want to choose our own book. Questions or comments?
Questions over here? Do you have any questions? I have one comment. Ann Baldwin, you're a rock star. If you guys want any information on College Credit Plus, please go to our website. She has a little link there or a little tab. Just hit on it, and she has an informational video that is fantastic for any parents out there that want information. Go to it. So thank you. I know that was a lot of work, and it is really, really good. Really good. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Standing business, donations, 13.01. We have lots of donations here. Any questions or comments? Can we have a motion first
So moved.
and a second?
Second. Second.
Questions, comments? I feel like you guys are falling asleep.
Yeah. Keep us awake, President.
Okay.
Just one real quick thing. Obviously, we thank all of the people here, but every once in a while, we will see donations on here in memory of, in honor of, and that's just, I don't know, that's just a little bit of a deeper touch to me, that somebody's perhaps lost a loved one or something like that. All of this is wonderful, but for those of you that just give kind of deeply out of your soul, we're just maybe just a touch even more thankful, so thanks.
And in that same vein, all of it is, as you say, wonderful. I had some word from some members of Church of the Messiah, and I think it's worth pointing out how the churches in Westerville have stepped up to help our students and to help address needs of our students within our buildings. So there are a couple of donations on here from Church of the Messiah that assist in doing that. It's such a great thing that our faith community joins with our education community, joins with our parents, and joins with our community to help make sure that the needs of our kids are met.
I agree. Very nice. Bart?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Thank you, Bart. 13.02, out-of-state overnight field trips. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? Anyone want to?
Anyone want to go?
I was going to say, does anyone want to go with them?
Am I reading this second one correctly, that they're going to Italy?
You are.
I asked them to send you a postcard.
Grazie.
That's as good as it's going to get for you.
Okay. Bart?
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Thank you. 13.03, resolution approving summer capital improvements construction projects for fiscal year 16 and bid packages. And I bet Mr. LaRose is going to join us and tell us all about these.
Tracy,
But we need a motion. What
Ah,
Bart?
we
sorry, excuse me.
we need a motion.
he wanted to tell you.
I know.
So moved.
Second.
I'm tired, I'm sorry.
It's late.
I'm sorry, Jeff. Dazzle us,
No
wake us
problem.
up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, the scope of work for bid package 8 is to perform district-wide paving repairs. 8.1 is to construct an exterior basketball court at Walnut Springs. 9 is to replace the water and fire mains at Wilder Elementary, and bid package 10 is to renovate the stadium restrooms at North High School. Bids were solicited in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code on April 13th and 20th. We received 10 bids that were publicly read on May 5th. The total of the lowest responsible bids is $769,010, coming in 5.6% under budget. The lowest bid for paving work was submitted by BNC Blacktop in the amount of $416,000. The lowest bid for the exterior basketball court work was submitted by Sheedy Paving in the amount of $52,435. The lowest bid for site plumbing work was submitted by Spear Mechanical in the amount of $259,075. And the lowest bid for the restroom renovation work was submitted by Ultimax in the amount of $41,500. Regal Plumbing withdrew their bid, who was low, but by withdrawing their bid, that made Ultimax the lowest bid. So it is being recommended that the board accept the bids as presented.
Questions, comments?
Only comment would be that the common theme here is asphalt, which is a really big problem for the district after this past winter. It's a really big problem for everybody in central Ohio, but it's been a real challenge. I think that, to Jeff's credit, we do a lot of work with little funding in this space by taking a patching approach versus a replace. But it is a big challenge for us. I think also in that same vein, another thing that we're coming across is San Francisco recently is an interesting case in point on this, and Los Angeles. If your water main lines are 75 to 100 years old, cast iron is not built to last forever. So we're certainly seeing some infrastructure issues, very old lines, sewer and water, those types of things that are probably going to be coming up on the docket for approval to have those things fixed. And obviously, in those cases, they're unplanned, but absolutely necessary, both from a safety and a health standpoint. So.
This blacktop for $416,000, where is, maybe it's on here, but I don't see, where are we going to be doing all that?
26 different locations.
26 different locations. Ripping up or just patching?
Patching.
Really?
So it's tearing out the bad, it's the potholes, it's any of that alligator cracking that's severe enough that we think it's going to fail within the year. That's cut out, and we make sure that it is properly compacted and then put the new asphalt in.
And most of the, you know the work of all these people that bid, I'm sure that they're very good.
We hope so.
No. I wanted a yes from that.
Under Jeff's supervision, it'll be done right. He is a tough supervisor, I can tell you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. LaRose.
Welcome.
Okay.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Okay, 13.04, resolution authorizing sale of real estate owned by the board and no longer needed for school purposes. May I have a motion
So moved.
and a second? Second. And Jeff, do you want to talk to us about this too, please?
I will, thank you. This resolution is in reference to the property at 28 Winter Street, known as the Warehouse Annex. The property is 0.2 acres and includes a 3,500 square foot block building as shown in Exhibit A of the purchase contract. The City of Westerville has expressed interest in purchasing the property at fair market value for the purpose of expanding public parking in the uptown area. Ohio Revised Code 3313.41 does allow a Board of Education to sell property to a municipal corporation as an exception to selling by public auction. The attached real estate purchase contract includes a sale price of $160,000 as appraised by Brian W. Barnes and Company last November. The property is being sold as is, and closing is to occur within 45 days after full execution by both parties. Execution of the contract by the City of Westerville is contingent upon approval by the Westerville City Council, the Uptown Review Board, Westerville Planning Commission, and a satisfactory environmental inspection. And it is being recommended that the board approve the sale of the property to the City of Westerville per the attached purchase contract.
What are the chances all of these things are going to happen? A satisfactory environmental? Come on.
Let me jump on that, Dr. French, because I think it's a very valid question. I think everyone on the board knows that I've stayed very close to this discussion ever since the beginning. Look, while this is an appropriately submitted bid with due diligence on both the part of the city and the school board, it is, an offer with contingencies. And to my mind, it basically is a good faith offer. The bar that needs to be passed by the city, frankly, are the city's obligations. We've seen a couple of different variations of schematics and plans for the parcel. I am almost certain that the Uptown Review Board in particular will have a part to say in what it looks like and how it will be structured to fit in with the rest of the neighborhood as well as the Uptown District. I think that the benefit to this approach, as Jeff mentioned, being in accordance with law, we bypass all of the additional expenses associated with auction that certainly would have accrued. And we also, have expressed to the city multiple times the concerns of the community about the property. And I want to be specific about that. I'm not talking about individual interests. I mean, the fact of the matter is that that's been a Hamby overflow lot. We know that we have Hamby parking issues. This is not an issue that's isolated to a single person. This is a community issue. I think that the city is showing planful thinking around that subject. That being said, they've got some hurdles to clear. They have some hurdles to clear on their side. So I would tell you that the indication is that they'll clear those hurdles. But as far as I'm concerned, that's their problem and not ours. So.
Well, it's ours if they don't clear the hurdles, then we're stuck again.
But this is typical, right, Jeff? I mean, of what they do? This is,
Well, it's something that we would have to do. And in terms of the environmental inspection, knowing that at one time that was a maintenance facility, they just want to make sure that they're not inheriting any issues with oils that may have saturated in the ground that would be a hidden cost with environmental cleanup. The city council is just giving the city manager authority to execute the contract. Now, in terms of what they're wanting to use it for, and again, these are the steps that we go through every year with our construction, the construction process. So the Uptown Review Board has to approve the demolition of the structure if they choose to do that. And then if they change use, going from a warehouse to a public parking, that has to go through the planning commission process. And again, these are the same processes that we have to go through as well.
okay.
So they are targeting a first reading this month with City Council approval in June, and then subsequently working with Planning Commission and the Uptown Review Board, hoping to achieve that over the summer months, and then going into closing sometime in the fall.
Back when we talked about this initially, and it became clear to you, I think, at that point that we were in favor of moving ahead, I raised the issue of making sure that those people who live close to it were aware, because as I said then, it's a darned ugly building, but even so, tearing it down, it seemed to me to be the appropriate thing to do as stewards of the public, to let them know that that's going to happen. Now, technically, that would be the city telling the residents what they plan to do with it. However, since the city's public and we're public, I would like for us to follow up with the city after we vote on what we're going to do here, follow up with the city to ensure that the neighbors are made aware. I'm not saying the neighbors need to approve or disapprove, but I think they should be aware that the buffer that building provides for them will no longer be there. And I agree, I think the Uptown Review Board will make sure that things are handled well. I have every confidence in the Uptown Review Board in doing that, but it is still a shock when one day the bulldozers show up.
And I think that goes along with us being transparent. I think it's just kind, the right thing to do.
And going through this journey with them on multiple projects, I believe they do a very good job of getting that information out to those adjoining neighbors. For example, anything that's adjacent to our property, I always get a notice if I want to choose to attend. And just like the board meetings here, they have opportunities for public comment at each of these councils that they would be seeking approval on. So not only here is the public comment, but City Council, Planning Commission, Uptown Review Board, all of those have those opportunities.
So, but Nancy, to your point, I'll make the personal commitment that I will interact with city colleagues on both the City Council and with Dave Collinsworth to emphasize that point, that as a school board, we feel that that's the right messaging from both of our entities to the neighbors in that area as we hand that property over, if we close the contract. We just think it's the right thing to do. So I'll take that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. That eases my mind.
So he'll be knocking on your door.
Yes, he will, and I will be waiting for him.
Nice. Okay, Bart.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker.
Yes?
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. 13.05, approval of the 2015 graduates from Westerville Central, North, and South. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Woo-hoo!
That's right.
Any questions, comments? Anyone we want to pull out?
Yeah.
There's just one.
Sorry.
So far, Dr. Kellogg's not able to give us numbers, but he's working on that.
It's more than 7.
Yeah, it's it, yeah.
Total numbers.
We'll count them as we're shaking hands together over
All you have to do
Memorial
is
Day
call
weekend.
the three principals, and get out your trusty calculator. Oh, no.
It's an honor.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. French.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Bart, you're getting worse as the night goes on,
Yeah.
so we need to hurry. Okay.
We need to hurry.
13.06, resolution to approve admission and waiver of tuition for our foreign exchange students.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Quick one, I will get fined if I do not highlight the fact that Westerville Sunrise Rotary has a couple of foreign exchange students
Oh,
on here.
for
I
Pete's
knew
sake.
you would
Oh,
bring
I'm
it up.
sorry,
You know
do you
what?
not?
Can I
Okay.
piggyback on that? Because right now, our family is hosting a Rotary Exchange student, and she is delightful, and it has changed our lives. And anyone that is even entertaining the idea should truly, truly do it. I love her little motto, and I think it's a morning thing. I wrote it down because I asked her, making world peace one exchange student at a time. And I think that's true, because all the kids' lives they change here in school and then in our community. She just gives back. She's delightful. So anyhow, sorry, I'm off my soapbox. It really is amazing. It is. Okay.
And she's with the Sunshine Club. So, okay,
The morning one.
the morning one.
I'm going to vote against this. I want all of you to.
No. Okay.
No.
Bart, sorry.
Dr. French.
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Okay. We do not have any public comments. Board comments?
I will just quickly say that it's been a great night, and especially the opportunity to honor our retirees.
Yes.
Who, know that they only have 4 more days, and they're all, what, 3? 4? Working, working, I saw that, yes, working. Oh, no, many of them look very young. I told them they're too young to be retiring. So I'm sure they've got plans for the future, so it was fun. Thank you.
Anyone else? Rick?
I'm just waiting to vote on closing this thing out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think I want to say a couple words. Westerville Education Foundation had their mini golf outing this weekend. If you were there, raise your hand. Okay. Thank you for all of you that came and for supporting it, and what a great group that is and how they support our kids, so thank you. Dates, times, and locations. The board will meet in regular session on Monday, June 8th and June 29th at 6 p.m. and for a special session on Friday, June 19th at 8 a.m. at the Early Learning Center. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Bart?
Who made the motion?
I did.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. French,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. And we are adjourned.